5. That's how many times I tried to learn Blender. 5 times I downloaded it. 5 times I opened it. And 5 times I rage quit because you used to select objects in Blender with the right mouse button. A friend of mine actually solved this by holding the mouse upside down, and honestly, I get it. 3 times I quit just because of this right-click nonsense altogether. And then the UI attacked me. I created viewports inside of viewports inside of viewport, kind of like some sort of a Blender inception moment, and that was attempt number 4. But here's the good news for you. All of that weirdness is gone, and those things won't stop you anymore. And today I'm going to show you the exact process, what finally broke the curse for me, and kind of stepped everything up so I could become an efficient low-poly modeler that eventually even led to this YouTube channel. So let's get you to the cookie dough stage of Blender, and this is where it actually becomes fun. When you start Blender, you can ignore almost everything. You can ignore the tabs, you can ignore the icons, the bottom bar, and all the weird stuff. Just go to the modeling tab, delete the camera, delete the light, you don't need that to start with, select the cube, yes, with the left mouse button, and then you press tab and you're in edit mode. And now you start to learn basic box modeling. I have a 20-minute crash course that shows you exactly how to do this, so instead of repeating that in this video, check out the link in the description and follow along with that. But let's talk about your learning journey, because you need a plan. Think of it like baking cookies. There's an order to things. You don't turn on the oven, throw a bowl in there, and then go and buy the ingredients. If you do things in the right order, you can enjoy the cookies before they're even finished. Cookie dough ice cream exists for a reason. And Blender works in the same way. You can enjoy the results way before you finish learning Blender. Welcome to phase 1 of your modeling journey, the cookie dough stage. And this is where you become dangerous. This is where you go from, I don't know Blender, to I can make game-ready art. Start by learning the basic box modeling technique, and this is the absolute simplest form of modeling, and all you need to do to begin with is to memorize 5 shortcuts. It's G to move, E to extrude, S to scale, R to rotate, and I to inset. That's it. I've made entire spaceships using only these shortcuts. And once you're comfortable with those, you can start to add a few more, like Control R to add loop cuts, for example. You can start to explore modifiers that you can use to manipulate and detail your objects in different ways. And then you can explore basic extensions and add-ons like Auto Mirror, for example, and loop tools. They come with Blender, and it can speed up your modeling process tremendously. When you have basic models in place, then you should learn how to colorize them. I recommend using a color palette texture. It's a fast, clean, and tidy way, and you don't need to learn UV unwrapping yet or texture painting. Check out the links in the description to my Pixpal palette texture. It's free, and also I have videos on how to use this, and you'll colorize your low poly art in an instance. And this is your cookie dough. Once you reach this point, then you can already make game-ready art, and I've made a living using this type of art and this style for 5 years, and with some practice you can do the same. Next, learn basic rigging, and this is where you create an armature or a skeleton for characters so you can pose and animate them. Start by learning simple armatures so you understand how they work, and then you can move into Rigify. That's an advanced rig that comes with Blender. That's great if you're animating inside Blender, but if you want to animate for games, then I recommend that you learn using a basic rig that works with that game engine instead. Then you move on to basic keyframe animation, and this is the first time that you'll be visiting the animation tab. And you start simple here. Start by animating an object movement, rotation, and scale. And then for characters, then you can start with simple animations like an idle animation. You only need 2 poses for that. An idle animation where it kind of stands still and breathes in, and then you let Blender interpolate between those, and then you're done. And then you can move on to things like walk cycles or creating expressive animations with the traditional animation principles. The same ones apply in here. So everything up to here is just my core skill set, and this is the dough. You can literally sell the dough. It's pretty cool. But if you want to bake epic cookies, then you want to move on to and progress to phase number 2, which is your rendering journey. So if you want to show off your cookies, then you need a little bit more textures. You need to learn cameras and materials and compositing and rendering. So if you don't want to just colorize the models like I do, now is the time to learn how to UV unwrap and texture paint them. So you learn first by doing UV unwrapping, and this is how you create seams along your model, and then you can kind of unwrap your model into a 2D plane And here's where you can start to paint and add details and flair to your model. Don't settle for automatic UV unwrapping. It creates messy and unoptimized UVs, and it's difficult to paint on those, and it reduces the texture quality. But once you've learned how to UV unwrap, then you can start to texture paint, and you can do that right inside a Blender, or you can use external programs like Photoshop or Krita. And I prefer to paint right inside a Blender because it's kind of primitive, the tool set, but it's got what you need. And most people, I think, that go into texture painting, they prefer to use some form of a tablet to do that because it can be a little bit difficult to do it with a mouse. Then you can move on to learn how cameras work. They can be super simple. You just point them and then hit render, or you can get a little bit more advanced by setting focal length. You can do depth of field and animate movement for the cameras. Then after that, you learn a little bit more about materials and nodes, and especially if you want to render high quality images and animations inside Blender, then you learn how to do your materials in here. But remember, game engines won't use these materials, so you have to recreate those materials in a game engine, but kind of the same principle applies in there. Then you can move on to learn compositing. If you want bloom, for example, then you need a glare node. And when you render images and animations inside Blender, you can do things like masking in here, you can apply filters and apply creative effects, and that's all done in the compositing tab. Now you have the necessary tools to render still images and create awesome animations inside Blender. And then you can move on to phase 3 of your journey, and that is your sculpting journey. Some people absolutely love sculpting. I'm more of a box modeling person, but sculpting in Blender has become really good lately. It's more organic, so sculpting, you can create cool characters and faces and creatures, and it may look easy when you look at some people doing it, but it can take years to master. So I recommend start with box modeling, because then you learn things like vertices, edges, and polygons, and how meshes are constructed, and that will benefit you when you go into the sculpting phase. You cannot throw a sculpt right into a game engine. You need to retopologize it first. Fewer polygons, better performance, and better deformation without pinching, and easier UVs to paint on. And this is why it's better to learn box modeling first and then do sculpting, so you understand these principles when you need to reduce the polygon count instead of increasing it. There's much more to Blender that you can learn from here. If you want procedural magic, start learning geometry nodes. I've created procedural tree generators for both conifer trees and broadleaf trees. Super fun and super powerful. So no, you don't need to hold your mouse upside down. You don't need a million viewports. Just download Blender and start with basic box modeling and get yourself to that cookie dough stage. Once you're there, Blender stops being scary and it starts to become fun. And from that point on, every step, animation, rendering, sculpting, procedural stuff, it becomes something you're actually ready for. So if you want to reach the cookie dough stage today, check out this crash course on how to model game-ready low-poly fantasy props in Blender 5.